We are getting a behind-the-curtain glimpse now of the drama among Democrats in the months before the 2024 election. Here is one nugget. Former President Obama reportedly did not want the VP Harris to replace Biden as the nominee because he thought that she would lose. Want to bring in Karl Rove on this, and there's still some pieces to be filled in on this, Karl. Here's Jonathan Allen, co-author of one of the books, one of the two books out right now, earlier today on Fox and Friends. Watch here.
She's like, Joe, you have got to endorse me. So they go back and forth on this before Biden does it. Obama definitely did not think she should be the Democratic nominee.
He would not endorse that day either.
He would not endorse that day either. She talked to him. He said to her, I don't want to put my thumb on the scale. She was disappointed, but not necessarily shocked, because he's been behind the scenes trying to undermine her for the last several weeks before Biden even got out.
So what he was pushing for apparently was like a mini primary or open convention. And remember, Carville had that piece at, I think it was the New York Times around that time. He was pushing for the same thing. I don't know how Hillary Clinton fits into all of this, but you're up to speed on it, Karl. How do you analyze it?
Well, at the time, what I was hearing from others, Democrats, was that it was Obama and Hillary, and it wasn't necessarily that they were opposed to Kamala Harris. There are two ways to look at this. One is that they were against her and wanted to have somebody else. I think a more accurate portrayal is, while they had doubts about her, but felt a process of a, quote, open convention would strengthen whoever ultimately became the candidate. Remember, Obama came on the scene in 2007 with a fantastic announcement in Springfield, but then stumbled through the spring and summer of 2007. If you talk to the Obamaites, they think he became a better candidate by having a primary process, and I think that governed his attitude towards replacing Joe Biden. It'd be better to have a, quote, open convention, and even though it would be truncated, you'd have 6 or 8 weeks at most. But it would make for a better campaign and a better candidate. I think that's what they were thinking.
Well, one of the most coherent thoughts Biden might have had at the end was that Kamala Harris wouldn't be a good candidate against Donald Trump. That turned out to be true. There's another book written by Chris Whipple, and it talks about even the former chief of staff, Ron Klain, saying this, that Klain was startled. He'd never seen him so exhausted and out of it. Biden was unaware of what was happening in his own campaign. The president was fatigued, befuddled, and disengaged. Klain feared the debate with Trump would be a nationally televised disaster. And yet, Karl, watch here. This is just a reminder for everybody of how Democrats were defending Biden.
I don't deny that it was a bad debate performance. That's different than whether or not the president is up to the job. He's clearly up to the job. He's doing it every day. He's doing it successfully.
His mental acuity is great. It's fine. It's as good as it's been over the years.
He is as sharp as ever, as I have known him to be in my engagement, in my experience with him. And I know when I walk into the Oval Office or see him on Air Force One, I have to be on top of my game.
As happens with these books, Ron Klain yesterday said, my point wasn't that the president lacked mental acuity. He was out of it because he had been sidelined, not because he lacked capacity. I'm not sure I believe that, Karl.
Yeah, I don't. And no, look, they have to do this because they were part and parcel of a gigantic conspiracy to hide from the American people the fact that Joe Biden was simply not up to the task. They were more concerned with making certain that he would be the candidate than they were with what the country needed and what the country deserved. This really, should make us angry. These people knew that he was not up to the job, and yet rather than go to him and say, Mr. President, it is time for you to call an end to this and allow the Democratic Party to nominate somebody else, they put him into this campaign, put him into that debate. One question that we really ought to ask is, who agreed? Who thought a June debate 3 months before we've ever had a presidential debate? Who thought that that was a good idea? Because I think that person might have had the conviction that an early debate would show that he was simply not up to it and result in what we saw, which was his withdrawal from the race. But all these people saying now, oh, you know what, he really was up to it. Who are they kidding? We all saw it, and we all knew it.
Yeah. Karl, thanks. Not the last book either, right? I guarantee you that. Thank you, Karl. Nice to see you today.
Thanks,
In
Karl.
Austin. Thank you.
Biden held the nuclear football, turbocharged inflation, opened the border, and let 2 wars kick off. And now they're telling us he was too exhausted to function? The entire Biden presidency and the people who orchestrated it need to be investigated. Biden was the worst president of all time, and he wasn't even the president. There needs to be consequences for the people who covered it up. A commission, a special counsel, something, anything. A good place to start? Releasing the tapes from Biden's interviews with special counsel Robert Hur. That'll rip the mask right off the Democrats' sick act. Dennis Quaid, my friend and actor. All right, Dennis, I mean, he wasn't president. I mean, and now everyone's writing books that, oh, yeah, he wasn't really president, and we covered it up. What's that about?
Yeah, I don't know. This is the staff that I guess was really running the country while all this was going on, and now doesn't want to take the blame for anything, I guess. But they're kind of confessing in a way, because everybody said he was in fine shape at the time.
What do you think needs to happen to these people? I mean, this is a hoax of the highest order, a fraud, in fact. And now it explains
they're going to make their money
everything.
off the books. Yeah, they're going to make their money off the books. And, you know, in the debate, too, I mean, going back at that to have Trump look like he was confused, you know, it comes down to the same kind of Democratic strategy where what they accuse the other side of, that's what they're guilty of looking perplexed and being perplexed.
Yeah, they said Trump was like mentally ill. And meanwhile, Joe was falling asleep halfway through debate prep.
Yeah, but he did say Build Back Better.
That's right. And then he said, we killed Medicaid.
Yeah, yes, we killed it. You bet your life you killed it.
The comparison to Reagan, Dennis, people do make a
bash
comparison
here at all either.
Let me ask you, because you played Reagan in this great film. People compare, you know, they say Reagan was also, they said he had early onset Alzheimer's and people helped him be president. Do you see any similarities? I don't really see it with Biden.
No, Reagan was in charge of his faculties, and it didn't really set on until a few years after he was in the White House. I mean, this is a man, you know, who was in Red Square in the last year of his presidency, Reagan, you know, with Gorbachev, arm in arm. And it was like a victory celebration of the Cold War. To bring that off, you have to have control of your faculties.
Yeah, you sure do. I heard you're in a new movie, Happy Place. You play a Happy Face. You play a serial killer.
Yes, a real serial killer, the Happy Face Killer. I don't want to mention his name because he's in a hole over in Oregon and where he should be. And I'm not really interested in playing a serial killer. I did it because the story is really about his relationship between he and his daughter. It's told from his daughter's point of view. In fact, she wrote a book and had a podcast. She had a sweet, loving relationship with her father growing up as a child. And at the age of 15, she found out he got caught. She found out he was this monster. And how do you reconcile that, the sweet, loving dad, with this man who killed 8 women in 5 years back in the 90s? And that's really what our series is about. It's she reached out to as she got to be an adult, the families of his victims as a way of healing for herself, because she lived with shame, and really started to do something worthwhile for herself and for others who were victims.
Happy Face. It makes more sense now when you explain it that way, Dennis. Good to see you.
Yeah. Well, but then again, what else do you do after you play Ronald Reagan?
Exactly. Well, happy Liberation Day, Dennis. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Happy Liberation to you too, Jim. See you, Jesse.
All right. Newt Gingrich is the former Speaker of the House. Speaker, what would you do to get accountability for what the Democrats did to the country by hiding Joe Biden and lying to us about it?
Well, look, either there has to be a joint House-Senate committee or there has to be a special commission. I mean, I have to say, in all the years I've studied both as a history teacher and as, elected official, the idea that these people knew, and it's pretty clear now, that a lot of them knew that he was gone. And it raises the question, who was the president of the United States during this period? Or who were, because it may have been a group. I mean, it's an astonishing moment. And I think it requires a very in-depth look, day by day, at the decisions that were made. Were they really made by the president? Or were they made by his staff? And second, how many Democrats owe the country a deep apology because they knew they'd been with him, they knew it was impossible, and they lied about it? And I can't remember any event in American history that involves, including Woodrow Wilson's stroke and Edith Wilson, his wife, running the country. Nothing on this scale of constant deception, constant lying, and the fact that they propped him up. And it raises the genuine, legitimate question, who was the president, and do any of the things that they did in his name actually count if he didn't know who he was?
And that's a great question.
Deep, historic question.
That is a great question, and you might have to have the court decide that. But before you do that, why can't House Republicans subpoena Ron Klain, President Klain probably, and put him under oath and have him tell us what happened behind the scenes?
Look, I think both the House and the Senate should impanel special committees to just focus on this issue. Who was the president? Who lied about the president? Who made the decisions as though they were president? And what is the constitutional implication of having people who are not the president making these kind of decisions? I mean, I think this is a very serious, profound, historic moment, not a political moment. I mean, it ought to be a truly bipartisan committee, truly bipartisan effort, because all of us ought to have an interest as Americans in knowing what happened and how could we have been lied to for at least minimum of 2 or 2.5 years. We were being consistently, systematically lied to.
Those are great recommendations, and I hope the people in the House and Senate are watching, and we owe it to the country and to the truth to do that. Speaker, thank you.
Spring and Richard Fowler, Fox News contributor, Kayla McGee-White, Independent Women's Features Editor-in-Chief, and Steamboat Institute Fellow. So Jonathan Allen, in one book, paints a pretty damning picture of Biden's cognitive decline. Listen to what he said.
He needed, again, fluorescent tape on the floor to show him where to go. He needed teleprompters to talk to small groups, small donor groups. He would put on makeup early in the morning to do cabinet meetings, and then sometimes do the makeup and not do the meetings. Right. So they all knew that there was a level of decline.
Richard, this sounds like what everybody feared, but no one was willing to acknowledge.
Look, I think you have to create a clear, bright line between Democrats, right, party faithful, members of the Capitol, members on Capitol Hill, and those folks who are part of Joe Biden's inner circle, because there's a distinct difference between the two. The folks who saw Joe Biden every day, and folks who are sources in this story, who knew about this decline, who chose not to say anything, who chose not to say to party leaders and folks on Capitol Hill, hey, maybe we should have a robust primary. Hey, maybe the president's not doing as well as he should. Those folks, I think, they deserve to be chastised. They deserve to sort of walk the plank, right? They deserve much of the ire that they're getting from folks in the Democratic Party. But they aren't the same individuals who are on Capitol Hill saying, we need some change, we need some difference. They aren't Cory Booker, who on Tuesday set the record on the Senate floor for giving the longest speech, talking about many of the issues that Democrats care about. There are two different groups in this party, and I think they're making their difference very well known in this moment.
So there's that one book called Fight by Jonathan Allen and his partner. There's another book by Chris Whipple called Uncharted, How Trump Beat Biden, Harris, and the Odds in the Wildest Campaign in History, in which the Biden chief of staff, Ron Klain, is quoted as saying that Biden was fatigued, befuddled, and disengaged prior to that June debate with Trump. But listen to what Klain had said publicly about Biden prior to that. Listen here.
President is absolutely sharp, fit, on top of his game. People could see that for themselves. You don't have to take my word for it. People could see that for themselves last night in the press conference. We saw in the press conference last night was much more typical of what we saw in the debate preparations. The measure of him being president is being president. We're not hiring a debater-in-chief. We're hiring a commander-in-chief.
There's more gaslights there than in downtown San Diego.
There is, and I don't think it's fair to just pass the deflection and the blame onto just the people within the White House, because the fact is there are many of us who never had any interaction with Joe Biden as well, who are calling out the mental decline for years beforehand. Very few on the Democratic side were willing to do so. And looking back at all this, the frustrating part, John, isn't just that Democrats lied. I think I've become pretty accustomed to that now. It's that they thought they could get away with it. You don't put Joe Biden on that debate stage against Donald Trump unless you genuinely believed you had a chance of continuing to hide the true state of his cognitive decline from the public, or at the very least, depend on your lackeys in the leftist media to do it for you.
Or if you wanted to get rid of him.
Well, perhaps, but Ron Klain certainly seemed confident that he was going to be able to at least skirt through. And that's the problem, is it is that arrogance that has totally condemned the Democratic Party in the eyes of many Americans. And we've talked a lot since November about why Democrats continue to flounder. And while I certainly believe it's true, it's that they have no clear agenda, they have no clear leader. The bigger problem for Democrats is that even if they were able to muster a coherent opposition, not a single voter would believe anything that they have to say, which is why they are enjoying a 21% approval rating right now.
Well, Richard is proving, if nothing else, they are dressed in sartorial splendor.
Thank you.
But before we get into your comment, I just want to play this, because you said, you know, Democrats were saying one thing, other people were saying another thing. It's the people closest to Biden who are to blame for this. But listen to what members of the left-leaning media said about Biden right here.
There are some people who are at their best in their 80s.
Nancy Pelosi.
My mom was using a chainsaw.
Yeah.
It's not fair to the guy. If he's thinking and he stutters, he's overcome a lot of disabilities, the poor guy, in his life, you know, and leave him alone.
You have Wall Street Journal running a horribly sourced piece saying that Biden is unfit.
Anybody sitting down for an interview like that where you're being asked specific dates over and over again, you're not going to remember every single one.
F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever.
How could you even listen to that with a straight face?
Look, I think there's a lot. I think ultimately voters rejected that version of Biden, and I think the Democratic Party paid for that in the 2024 election, right? When the American people voted for Donald Trump. With that being said, on Tuesday, voters also went out to the polls and they voted, right? And in Wisconsin, they voted to keep the Supreme Court of Wisconsin Democratic.
And in Florida, they voted to keep those two congressional districts.
I was getting to Florida, and in Florida, what we also saw in those two Republican districts is the margins closed. Yeah. I'm not saying that to say that Democrats are, you know, somehow going to be the majority party, but what I'm saying to say is that there's something happening in the electorate. In the electorate, even a place like Missouri, right, where voters voted for Donald Trump, they also voted to raise the minimum wage. They voted to extend paid parental leave, things that Democrats are currently fighting for on Capitol Hill. So what I'm saying is that when you look at what voters want, they don't want necessarily Democrats or Republicans. They want politicians that are going to listen to what they're talking about, that are going to address issues that are happening at their kitchen table.
Quick last word from Kevin.
Well, they also want honesty. And the fact is, we can talk about who Democrats should run in 2028. We can talk about which agenda they should adopt. But until Democrats wrestle with the primary issue, which is how do you go about restoring credibility when you have shredded it with the American public? How do you go about earning back the good faith of the voters that you burned for 4 years? Until they wrestle with those questions, the Democrats are going nowhere as a party.
I think that's easy to do, though, in a world in which the stock market is tanking and people are telling them a tariff is not a tax, when we know that a tariff is a tax and it's taxing the American people.
Let's see where we are in a couple of weeks.
Dumpster fire Dems are breaking out the heavyweights. Barack Obama and Kamala Harris are coming to the rescue of the party they screwed over to trash President Trump.
People tend to think democracy, rule of law, independent judiciary, freedom of the press, that's all abstract stuff because it's not affecting the price of eggs. Well, you know what? It's about to affect the price of eggs.
There were many things that we knew would happen. Many things. I'm not here, so I told you so.
That comes as we learn how a top Harris campaign advisor was horrified by Kamala's infamous View appearance, where she couldn't think of anything she'd do differently from Joe Biden. Well, that moment caused Stephanie Cutter to blurt out, What the hell was that? And another bombshell Biden book is revealing how former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain said Biden was fatigued, befuddled, and disengaged before his debate disaster. An ex-Biden campaign staffer feels betrayed.
Ashley, do you feel lied to?
Yeah, I do. I think I hadn't been around the president before that debate, and I worked for Joe Biden. And if the people around him knew that he was not capable, it is unacceptable to me that they allowed him to go onto that stage. I deserve better as a voter, not even as a Democrat, as a voter and as an American. I do.
Do you love how all of a sudden, Katie, they're coming out and saying, I deserve better? How is it that we all saw it, but they didn't?
Yeah, if you had eyes and ears and you paid any attention to what was going on, not to mention the fact that the president was hiding from the American people for years on end and couldn't really speak for himself, you knew exactly what was happening. You were just in denial. So now they're in the state of acceptance and they're trying to rebuild their party. It's not going well. The approval rating of the Democratic Party is at 23%. And who do we see going out and trying to talk about it? The failed Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, doing what she's always done, going out and laughing, saying, I told you so, as if the American people really buy that things would be better under a President Harris. Are you kidding me? Especially with the jobs report today that came out that was good for the economy. You know, Democrats really have to also get rid of Barack Obama. I know he's a former president. He was popular when he left office, but he does not have a good track record of bringing Democrats with him. He went through one of the worst House losses in 2010 that you had seen in 2 decades. He is not good at getting on the campaign trail and bringing people with him to victory. And he also lied about Joe Biden. A month before Biden took that stage, he did a big fundraiser with George Clooney, trotted him out, then had to escort him off stage and still continued to ask people for money and for people to vote for Joe Biden. And so his credibility is completely shot, and they got to find new people because they're not trustworthy and people don't want to listen to what they have to say.
You know, Piers, the interesting thing is that Obama actually worked to derail Kamala. He didn't want her to be the candidate. And yet he didn't have the strength to do that. And even now, as supposedly the leader of the party, I mean, he's not coming out and doing what he should be doing.
Look, they all perpetrated a massive hoax and deceit on the American people. Let's be crystal clear. And if Kamala Harris wants to play I told you so, then let's play that game too. For example, March 2022, Joe Biden is showing increasingly worrying signs of age-related cognitive decline. That's a big problem for America and the world at such a critical time, as is the pathetic way the Democrats and much of the mainstream media keep trying to excuse his dreadful gaffes and talk up his supposedly commanding leadership. They're so desperate to portray him as the calm, smart, wise, fact-driven antidote to Donald Trump that they can't see the shambolic train wreck right in front of their eyes, or they see it but choose to ignore it. March 2022, followed 3 months later by a headline, "It may be time to invoke the 25th Amendment on failing Biden if he deteriorates further. If his functionality continues to deteriorate at the rate it's doing, then he will surely render himself constitutionally unfit to serve as president." Those are 2 columns in the New York Post by me. I'm not even American, let alone working at the White House, right? This was me, a British guy who wasn't even here for most of this period, just watching what I was seeing with my own eyes from all the gaffes and the cock-ups and him falling over, mumbling words, changing policies and so on. The truth is, everybody knew. Everybody knew. So for all of them to come out of the woodwork now and start disingenuously playing this game of, well, we weren't sure and blah, it's all baloney. It's baloney. And they should be held accountable to it. I mean, the Democrats have got a lot of soul searching. That poll number is catastrophic.
Yeah.
It's literally catastrophic. And their answer appears to be put Kamala Harris back out. She looked, I'm not saying she...
Go ahead.
She looked drunk in that video. She did. She looked like she'd been partying again. But I'd forgotten about the word salad, the annoying laugh and everything else. If that is the future, is to wheel her back out to try and say, I told you so, then let me remind you, we all told you and your party about the actual state of Joe Biden. And for another 2.5 years, you allowed him to pretend to run the United States of America. And that is a disgrace.
And, you know, Jesse, it's kind of amazing that she now is talking about the price of eggs, Kamala Harris, and even Stephanie Cutter, who said, you know, what is it? What the hell? It's not like she wasn't prepared for the question on The View, like, what would you do differently from Joe Biden? They prepped that question.
I love Piers.
Oh, thank you, Jesse.
To quote Piers Morgan,
you had me on I love Piers. You had me on I love Piers.
You're fitting in quite well, Piers. Yeah, so I don't know if she's drunk or not, but I told you so. We told you so. This woman couldn't answer what she would do differently, and they trained her to say what she would do differently.
Yeah.
Doug, her husband, who I love, just bent the knee and said, I'm going to do $100 million in free legal services to the president. Donald Trump has Kamala's husband working for him. That's what's going on right now. Biden was a vegetable for 4 years. Yeah. She just came out and said, I told you so. Where was she for 4 years? We had Newt on last night, Newt Gingrich, if you're unfamiliar with him. Not a member of parliament, it's the House, Piers. He said that they should impanel a joint House and Senate committee to do a full investigation of this cover-up.
He's right.
And they should bring in Ron Klain, swear him in under oath. What did you know and when did you know it? Because it looked like he was the president. And if he was the president and Joe Biden didn't know what he was doing, are all of his orders constitutional? Are they on firm constitutional ground? Could they be vacated? It's something I'd like to look into. And then talking about Barack Obama, Hussein, I won't say his middle name, but I did. Doesn't he look, I know you're going to like this word, feckless? Because when you see the kind of power the presidency has and the way Donald Trump exercises it, and just him doing absolutely nothing for 8 years on trade, on wages, on crime, what a missed opportunity.
Now, what did we miss, Greg, on this topic?
You know what? That is the best question I've ever been asked. We missed who's really guilty here. We have let the mainstream media off the hook in this story, right? The Democrats could only have pulled this off if they assumed they could have pulled it off.
That's right.
You know, we were talking about in the green room, like what possessed Morning Joe to go on and torch his own career in order to preserve the commander in coma. I mean, he said things that were like you could not say without your inner thoughts going, you're losing your mind, you're losing your mind, and yet they did. So there has to be a book. I'm too lazy to write it. There has to be a book on the decisions made by the head of networks to protect Biden. Why did these people do this when they knew? Why did they go after people for telling the truth, for speaking up, like what happened on CNN with Laura Trump? Why did they do that? It's crazy. You know, you see Obama and Harris out there. You know, by the way, someone should have cut off Kamala at the bar, not during her speech, because, yeah, she was loaded. Speaking from experience, that was fun. But if you notice, there's no appealing face for the Democratic Party, and here's why. All the people you see have crazy eyes. Have you noticed that? Have you noticed AOC, Jasmine, Cory Booker? Remember Cory Booker? My mouth is on fire. You know, I just ate a hot slice of pizza. My mouth is on fire. That's how he talks. They all act and look like that crazy homeless woman you caught peeing in your driveway. Eyes are bulging like pinballs. It's hilarious and it's sad. So you have to have Obama show up, and he's going through a crisis because he's looking at Trump and he's going, why him and not me? I'm actually seeing hope and change. You know, this isn't symbolism and threats. This isn't like a bunch of catchphrases and platitudes. I mean, he's doing what I promised. On the border, on tariffs. He got rid of ISIS. Man, it's like, how does he do this? And it's because the Democrats, they can act, but they can't take action. And that is what you're seeing.
It's talking the talk and not walking the walk. All right, coming up, the Tesla terror dance squad is making a comeback. Anti-Musk crazies gearing up for a nationwide protest.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.